Will it be a fierce Nord warrior, Breton mage? No, it's gonna be a sneaky archer again. That's Skyrim in a nutshell. This year, 2021, we celebrate the 10-year anniversary of the Elder Scrolls V, Skyrim. And in this video we're gonna take a look back at this excellent open world RPG, which became a fan favorite. This is the first of a series of videos where I'll be looking back at some of my favorite RPG and strategy games. It's going to be part review, but mostly my experience with the game. Intro. 2011 was the perfect year for Skyrim to make its introduction. Just 10 years after the release of both the Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter movies, fantasy was becoming bigger and bigger with a larger audience. This was also the year Season 1 of Game of Thrones was released. Now I'm not gonna talk about the ending. So the world was more than ready for an epic fantasy RPG. With regards to graphics, The Elder Scrolls was also one of the first game series to take the plunge in next-gen quality. Well, what was next-gen at that time? What I mean by that is that in 2006, Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion was one of the first games to actually show playing characters that started to look like actual humans, compared to the pixels of earlier games. Next to that, you had the breathtaking scenery. You really had the feeling you were walking through a lush green forest or through farmlands. Coming 5 years later, in 2011, Skyrim improved on this experience with even better graphics and an open world that let you have the sense that you could live there. It was one of the first times I myself, as a gamer, had this experience. The story of Skyrim is well known. Taking place centuries after the events of Oblivion, once mighty empire of Tamriel is a shadow of its former glory. Devastated by war against the racist Thalmor, the Third Aldmeri Empire, which it narrowly survived, but not without making a couple of large concessions to the Aldmeri. The game picks up in the northern province of Skyrim, a region consisting of mountains, icy tundras, lush forests and a number of sprawling cities, and the scenery of a bloody civil war. Next to that, for the first time in many centuries, the lands are plagued by dragons. And this is where you, the player, are introduced. You are the Dragonborn, immortal with the soul of a dragon, meaning over the course of the game you develop the skills and special powers of a mighty dragon, next to the other more mundane abilities. Like all Bethesda games, both in the Elder Scrolls as in Fallout, the main storyline isn't the strong point here. Although I think in Skyrim the main story is still pretty good and entertaining. But, as you should expect, it is in the many side quests where the true strength of this game lies. Especially in the Assassin's Guild and Thieves Guild storylines. Both of these offer the right amount of betrayal, blind ambition and a couple of pretty interesting NPCs. My experience. I myself had been waiting for Skyrim some time, being an avid RPG fan since the mid-90s. The impressive ad on TV really didn't help my patience. That was almost a movie in itself. First I bought Skyrim for PC, but my gaming rig at the time was a potato. Graphic settings had to be set at ultra low and gameplay was abysmal, and that for a game that didn't push the hardware too far. Not satisfied and impatiently, I bought a completely new copy for my Xbox 360. So basically I spent about more than 100 euros on the same game in 1 week. This is, by the way, the only time I did this with a particular game, which shows you how much I wanted to play it. There are 3 instances I vividly remember from Skyrim. First, of course, the excellent intro, which has been spoofed many times on social media. The cart ride to Helgen, the impressive dragon attack and the flight through spider-infested dungeons. Next to that you have your first fight against a real live dragon, which for most of you will probably have gone down at the Western Guard Tower near Whiterun. The size of the dragon, the flames, the sound that he or she makes, all this makes this game worth it. Now in hindsight, the dragons in Skyrim aren't the most difficult enemies you can face. That honor is reserved for giants and that troll on the path to the Greybeards. The third instance, and the most memorable one, is a moment where I was just enjoying the scenery. I was on a mountain path somewhere to the northwest of Riften, I think, and looking down to the valley below I could see the majestic landscape, forests, the rivers, and in some distance from me a dragon flying relaxed in the air, probably patrolling a certain area. It's instances like these that made Skyrim so much more enjoyable for me, that made the world seem believable for me, a place where you could actually see yourself live. Nowadays, of course, it's the world of Witcher 3 that set the bar when it comes to world building. For instance, in Skyrim, most of the cities, which in the lore are thriving metropolises, in-game consist of slightly more than a dozen houses, a few shops and 1 or 2 inns, with a handful of NPCs wandering about. Whereas in The Witcher 3 you have Novigrad, with dozens and dozens and dozens of buildings and hundreds of NPCs, making it one of the largest and most convincing cities in gaming history. But realize that it was Skyrim that originally set the bar for this. Well, Oblivion as well. With regards to gameplay. The gameplay isn't perfect, especially when it comes to fighting. There are only a couple of moves you can make during combat, and I noticed this already on my first save in 2011. But I think this is just a small gripe, since Skyrim overall has so much to offer. The many quests, the different factions you can follow, the many different ways you can play and finish the game. It's the overall experience that makes this game such a classic. Now something on the graphics. Even when it came out the graphics were good in Skyrim, but not mind-blowing. However, especially when you're playing it on PC, the possibilities for improving the graphics through mods are practically endless. Skyrim is probably the game with the most mods available, many of whom can enhance the graphics in a certain way. Some mods are perfect for the overall scenery, others for character models or enhancing water and rivers, for instance. There are a couple of websites where all of these can be easily downloaded and for free. I will put in a link below where you can find the most. Next to that you have a couple of mods that add extra quests and storylines to the original game. For instance, there is a massive storyline where you can try to rebuild Helgen after the dragon attack. You can download that one for free, excellent voice acting included. Bethesda themselves put out an enhanced version of the game a couple of years ago to offer part of these improvements. For console players this could be a nifty addition. If you play Skyrim on PC, that version is a waste of money, however. Conclusion. Now comes the question, is Skyrim still playable in 2021 or going into 2022? I myself had a blast playing this RPG and still do on occasion. I think it's a huge improvement over Oblivion, an Elder Scrolls game I also played into the wee hours. Most veterans will probably look at Skyrim the same way and every now and then reinstall the game. I honestly think that for newbies Skyrim can be an excellent gaming experience as well. The gameplay itself is pretty easy to get into and while not overly original, still holds up. And the graphics can be improved immensely through the different mods out there. Besides that, there aren't actually that many first-person RPGs like Skyrim out there. Of course you have games like Fallout or The Outer Worlds, but a first-person RPG in a fantasy setting, it's still Skyrim all the way.